A lot of frustration that has been expressed there by the different journalists who've been forced to wait since the early hours of this morning, actually, because as you have correctly indicated to our viewers, the conference was supposed to get underway at around 8:30 this morning. Mabe finding it very offensive, if you will, that some journalists described the delays as chaotic. And he said that is not the case, and it's simply an issue of making sure that everyone is registered ahead of the conference. He actually even said that he'd rather start something late as opposed to starting early and things are not in order. Obviously, that is not sitting well with journalists. Some even starting to think that the whole private prosecution that has been formed against President Ramaphosa by former President Jacob Zuma under his foundation, the JZ Foundation, may be one of the things that are causing that delay. Mabe refuting this, saying it's simply an issue of the registrations. And I'm really hoping that we'll get an opportunity to go back to Slindelo Masikane, who is in Omonde, where the registrations are taking place. You saw earlier on when we crossed to her, there were scores of people that had not been registered, and we just want to see if any movement has happened since then. Bule also confident that the conference is set to take place at 2 o'clock and that they will meet that target. It is now just before 2 o'clock, 20 to 2 actually. And Doc, I'm just wondering, you listened to that press conference, and Bule being really offended by the fact that journalists are saying this is a state of chaos. We are hours late, the day basically gone, and nothing official has gotten underway. And he's at pains to say that nothing is wrong.
Hey, you know, honestly, I think it did the ANC a disservice. I mean, it's ridiculous. I watched it very closely what had happened. That journalist had just used the word chaos. What does chaos mean? It means disorder and confusion. And it's synonymous with disorganization. And, you know, obviously, look how many hours, 7, 8 hours later. So the journalists were completely correct, and several of them complained, actually. But it was pathetic, really, how he responded, you know. Went on a tangent about the meaning of chaos and defensive, etc. And that journalist simply said that, you know, what is going on, you know. I mean, it's really, and it's not the first time, really. I've seen him before, and, well, it's his last weekend. He says, he does the ANC a disservice, I think. He's brusque and confrontational, sometimes unnecessarily so, I think.
And this is going to be very problematic because I think journalists, analysts like yourself and others that are interested in South Africa's political landscape want to be able to comb through some of the details that are going to come out of the conference. And if there's no time to go through all of that as delegates, which we then have to digest, it's a little bit problematic because it leaves us a little bit in limbo in terms of the direction that the ANC is going to be taking over the next 5 years. So I think that's probably part of the frustration here, is that there are so many things to go through over the next 3 days, and now we've lost crucial hours.
Yes, no doubt. I mean, and to some extent, you know, you can perhaps say you can't blame him because maybe he's also become frustrated with the lack of progress and so on. But you should expect questions like that from journalists, you know. And I mean, I really think the way he responded to legitimate concerns by journalists was really unbecoming, you know, of the position that he holds, unfortunately. And he said something else which I left a bitter taste in my mouth. He said, this is an ANC conference. In other words, trying to say, you know, however long we take, you just have to wait, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, that was the import, and it was really so unnecessary, you know, and counterproductive, really.
We have to go into an ad break, but I must ask you, given what we've seen in terms of zero developments today, do you think realistically we will get to start the conference, but actually get through some important speeches that were set to be made today? Do you think that's going to happen?
Well, you know, he said 2 o'clock they'll resume properly, you know, begin the program today. So they've lost 5.5, 6 hours. Now, if you look at the organizational political report, really they're quite meaty. They would take some time, you know, to complete. And the big problem, I mentioned it earlier on, inevitably this is going to happen. Because they started so late, it's going to put definite pressure on completion of the program for today. They were supposed to finish at 11 o'clock tonight. You heard one of... I mean, you know, how are you going to finish at 11 o'clock tonight? Unless some items are dropped from the agenda, but then it's going to impact on tomorrow. Unless they have to start tomorrow hour 2 or 3 earlier. It's just, this is what happens, and that's why those journalists were completely correct to question what is happening here, you know, because they've got also work to do. And so what they've scheduled for today is negatively affected. And I don't know how they're going to handle this. It's very unfortunate because those political and organizational reports, you have to go through it as thoroughly as possible.
Yes.
And, you know, so I'm sure they're going to be under pressure. Ramaphosa and who's going to, what's his name?
David Mabuza?
No, yeah, the political report and organizational. I'm sure they're going to be under pressure to go through their reports as quickly as possible because we've lost 6 hours.
And I mean, I covered the conference in 2017, and when we went to these open plenary sessions, there's usually a lot of disruption. There's the booing of some or other candidates. So things don't get underway as efficiently as you would when they do start. And already there's so much friction in terms of who wants who to be placed where. And that in itself might cause a little bit of uneasiness and disruptions as they get together to listen in on this organizational report as well as the political report. What are your thoughts on that?
No, I'll tell you what my thoughts are. Honestly, I heard Mabe very closely about, you know, he feels all the questions about the delays. And really, the ANC has done itself a major disservice for this to happen. Basic stuff. I mean, this should have been, they knew they're having a conference, so the logistics and everything else, you know, should have been dealt with in good time so that they could have started at least 9 o'clock this morning. And they have to take responsibility, and I really think, I don't want to delve into it now, but I think it's really symptomatic of this ongoing organizational malaise of the ANC. It's expressed in numerous ways. People write about it all the time. The ANC has been in a real serious organizational mess for years. And look now with their major, most important probably ever, any national conference, look what happens on the first day, preventing even the program from kicking off. How can you rationalize and try to explain away with quite a bit of irritation, Pule Mabe?
Yes.
You know, it was really...
Yeah, and I'm so glad you bring up the organizational mess and this being a symptom of, because I want us to delve a little bit more into that.